Okay folks, so now we're back to our next video here in the selection series, and we were talking just earlier in the previous video about the supervisory interview. So that's when the candidate, and usually it's the short list of candidates, so maybe the final two are going to go in and meet with the boss's boss. These folks may make the ultimate decision, but usually the boss's boss will say, you know what, if I don't really have a strong preference for either one, you can hire whichever one you want. They might say, well, I have a preference for candidate 1 over candidate 2, but at the end of the day, it's up to you. So they usually leave the decision to you, but they do take the opportunity to express a preference. A lot of times it's good for the candidate to meet with the boss's boss because they can also provide their perspective of what the job's like. So they could provide maybe a more realistic or different perspective on the job than maybe has already been presented. So it's good to go through that step. And then the last step here is the hiring decision and the offer. So usually what will happen is they will use the test results, if there was any employment testing which went on, and probably would be, anybody's opinions from the interviews, including the supervisory interview. And the hiring decision is ultimately going to be made by the immediate boss, okay? And they will also provide their perspective of the job, so they can also provide a realistic preview of the job, not just the boss's boss, but the boss, him or herself. They also know the technical aspects of the job the best, so they will probably be able to see whether or not the candidate would be a good fit technically. They can also answer the candidate's job specific questions, okay, so it's good to have that person making the offer. And they also know the staff better, so they're in a better position to know whether or not the candidate will fit in with the current staff. So once the candidate's selected, the offer is made usually by the hiring manager, not by the HR department. The offer is usually made by the hiring manager, but HR is involved in the process to the extent that they will advise on a salary range and anything else that might impact HR policy. The runner-up candidate is usually not informed until the actual candidate that you want accepts the offer. And as we said before, the offer is usually made by the hiring supervisor or the person to whom this position is going to report. You should also make sure that you give candidates a reasonable period of time to make their decision. So you shouldn't put them on the hot seat and say, well, I need to know now. You should give them a couple of days, or at least maybe 2 to 4 days to really make up their minds. They might want to check things out themselves. They might want a chance to talk to people that they may know that work in the organization to get a good feel for what happens in your company. They may think of other questions that they want to ask before they accept the offer. They may want to talk it over with family members, their spouse, whatever, in order to determine if this is the position that they want. So I wouldn't call the runner-up candidate until you speak with your preferred candidate, okay? But do give them time to make their decision. The other thing we have to think about too in the selection process is reliability and validity. Is the process reliable and valid? So again, no matter who interviews and selects employees, the selection process will be seen to be reliable if the same decision would be made given the same selection procedures. So we wouldn't have hired anybody different, okay? We had all the right selection procedures and the right person was offered the job. We wouldn't have made a different decision, so our procedure wouldn't have changed. Now, that's what a reliable process, that's how we defined a reliable process. So again, your selection process is reliable when no matter who interviews and selects the employees, the same employee would have been selected. So your procedures are reliable. Now, is it valid? When you look at all the information that you obtained from your testing, your interview questions and everything else, they were accurate predictors of good job performance. So we administered the right tests. We had the right questions in the interview. We did everything right because our person is performing well. So now that they're on the job, how are they performing? If they perform well, we would assume that everything we did in the selection process was appropriate. We asked the right questions and we tested properly. So this concludes our video.